Ravens now 5-5. First time they're 500 since week 2 when they beat the Cleveland Browns. Joining us now to preview this week's game from USA Today, the Ravens Wires on the Window Nation guest hotline, Kevin Oestricher. Kevin, good morning. How you feeling?
Feeling good. Ravens 4 in a row, and, they have another game here against the Jets that is winnable. Now, they made it a little difficult on themselves in this Week 11 game, but a win is a win nonetheless, no matter how ugly it gets.
What do you think of the red zone problemos that the Ravens have had here as of late? I mean, they're breaking out the hurricane to get the eventual game-winning touchdown against the Browns. But why the struggles, Kevin, last few weeks there in the red zone?
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been great. Going into Week 11, they were 27th in the league in red zone offense, and obviously didn't help themselves any in this game with 1 for 4. It's just, it feels like whenever they get down in that area, you're kind of expecting to kick the ball. And there are a lot of different things that go into that, especially because they're getting down, the Derrick Henry run, they get down to the 9, and, they're getting down to the 4, et cetera, et cetera. And, I'm almost trusting them to pick up 14 yards more than I trust them to pick up 4 yards. And, I get it. When you get down there, the field shrinks and, it becomes a little more difficult. But you have Lamar Jackson, you have Derrick Henry. The Ravens have generally been a good red zone offense, but this year that just has not been the case. And so, execution hasn't been there. It feels like they're getting too cute at times with the play calling. Feels like they're telegraphing some plays as well, like Derrick Henry runs where, teams are selling out for because they know what's coming. So there are a lot of different things, but I mean, they've done enough over these last 4 weeks, even with some of those problems. They haven't been terrible in the red zone in all of those games, but it's been an overarching issue for the entire season, which they're going to have to figure out.
Kevin, what do you think of Lamar's performance?
It wasn't great. I mean, it definitely wasn't his best day, and there are a couple of reasons for it. Probably, I mean, obviously with that O-line, you can't ask him to go out there and every single play say, okay, you're going to save us, Lamar, please. And the offensive line is giving up all these pressures, and Myles Garrett's in his face every second, and he's taking sacks and taking hits. But, I mean, he was also throwing behind guys. He was throwing below guys. The interceptions weren't his fault, obviously, bouncing off of Keaton's hands. And then, obviously, the one where Rosengarten was driven back into the pocket. But, just didn't really look like himself out there. And I know a lot of people are kind of wondering, how healthy is he right now with the hamstring? Is that lingering? Or, that knee issue he was nursing on Wednesday and didn't practice because of, some of the stuff that he hasn't done with his legs this season. But I mean, still, he feels good enough to play in the games and not be necessarily a hindrance. But this to me was a game where Lamar certainly did struggle. And, it's all right that he did because, he's saved this team so many times. I'm really glad the defense was able to pick up the slack for both the offense and the special teams. But, it wasn't Lamar's best day. And hopefully he'll be able to bounce back next week against the Jets because, this is it's an offense that still has to figure things out, whether it be offensive line-wise, red zone-wise, like we just talked about, short yardage situations. But, Lamar's allowed to have a bad game every now and then, especially if it's during a win. So, it was tough overall, but they still were able to pick up the W.
Yeah, I agree with you. His passing was off. And you know what else was off? His run reads were off. Just like the first play of the game. I have no problem with him keeping it, but, when he tries to outrun Schlesinger, in reality is Likely was out there, and he needed to cut it up inside is what he needed to do. And he missed a couple other run reads, too, and one of them down on the goal line, where he should have kept it, or I can't remember if he should have kept it or didn't keep it. But I just thought that he was just off in that game.
It almost reminded me a little bit of the AFC Championship game a couple of years ago where, he had that run down the sideline. That's Lamar Jackson. It was L'Jarius Sneed who he should have outrun, but he was hurt, and he admitted that after the game. I forget when he admitted it after everything ended up happening, but he was banged up. And, you're like, oh, okay, Lamar Jackson down the sideline, he's going to outrun anybody. And he didn't. He tried to cut it up inside, and, that was like, okay, something's not right here. And kind of feels like that's what we saw in this game a little bit as well. And, I remember last year when the Ravens lost to the Eagles and, Lamar was talking about how his mom was saying he has to take the rushing lanes, and when they're there, just go. And, here are these reads, go. They're wide open. And I think that's some of the stuff that I would like to see from him moving forward. But again, it's like, what's the confidence level right now with him? How healthy is he feeling? Because, usually when those are open, you see the dynamic ability, you see the cutting ability like you were talking about, where he can just do a one-cut move inside, and, he's juking three guys out of their shoes with one move, and hasn't felt like that's been there. So, I don't know if we're ever going to know the full extent of how Lamar's feeling or not. He said he's feeling good, and, all right, cool, he's feeling good. But how good is he feeling on a percentage scale? I don't know if he's ever going to get that specific with it, and that's okay because, it's a situation where no one's playing at 100% at this time in the year. But I'm curious genuinely about what that threshold is for him. Is it like 95%? Is it 90%? Is it lower than that? So, Lamar is someone that is so dynamic with his arm and with his legs. Both areas of him, both avenues are extremely effective. So when one isn't working, he has that other one. But, what makes him Lamar is because both of those work so effectively. So when one is kind of off or he's not feeling great or whatever the situation is, I don't know what Lamar's health situation is right now, but whatever it is, it does impact a couple of different things.
Kevin Oestricher, USA Today, the Ravens Wire. Kevin, what's happening on the Ravens Wire on this Turn It Up Tuesday ahead of the Jets?
Yeah, just diving into what the Ravens have in store coming up in Week 12. Obviously, you got a couple reunions with Tyrod Taylor now being the starter instead of Justin Fields, and old friend Brandon Stevens coming back to Baltimore, which I know everybody's excited about. So diving into offense, defense, special teams like we saw last week is going to probably play a factor as well. So diving into what the Ravens have in store.
Kevin, appreciate the time as always. Enjoy the rest of your Turn It Up Tuesday. We'll talk to you next week.
Awesome, guys. Appreciate you as always. Thanks so much.
There's Kevin Oestricher. We'll come back, whip around. We'll talk about that Monday Night Football extravaganza. If you're a Cowboys fan, not so